"We still live in that old house?" she mocked, and for a second I almost laughed. Almost. Because that old house was the same one she used to sneak into as a teenager, chasing my son like a fox in Sunday lace. That same front porch she used to roll her eyes at when I made her take off her shoes before stepping on my clean floors. And now, 15 years later, she was standing in front of me, pearls on her neck and poison in her smile, pretending her new life was gold. I stood at the doorframe wiping my hands on a faded dish towel, the same one with little sunflowers stitched into the corner. Her perfume, that loud, expensive kind that smells like apology and ego, hit me before her words did. "Still smells like pine sol and dreams in here," she added, stepping across the threshold like she was entering a museum of my failures. I didn't flinch, because women like her mistake silence for weakness. And I've learned, over 70 years of living, losing, and learning, that you don't have to raise your voice when your life already speaks louder. Back then, that house was my whole world. 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen that could fit exactly 3 people if one held their breath. I'd bought it with my late husband, Clarence, back when men wore hats to church and promises meant something. He poured the concrete himself, hands cracked, shirt soaked through, and every nail in these walls was a prayer he whispered for me and our son, Marcus. After he passed, I held onto it like it was the last piece of his heartbeat. Paid the taxes every year, fixed the roof myself when the storm took half of it. And when Marcus married that girl, the one now dressed in beige arrogance, I even offered them to stay here till they could get on their feet. But she didn't want our feet, she wanted our foundation. "Funny," I said finally, turning off the sink. "That old house's mortgage been paid off since before your first husband's second affair." Her smile twitched, just enough for me to see the truth break through her foundation. "Oh, you heard about that," she said, pretending it didn't sting. "Social media exaggerates things." I nodded slow. "So do people." That was the first silence of the evening, the kind that buzzes louder than words. I could feel the house itself listening, the wood creaking, the clock ticking, like it was waiting for the next scene. See, when Marcus left her, she told everyone I was the reason, said I poisoned her marriage with my expectations, said I was jealous. Imagine that, a 70-year-old woman jealous of a child who barely knew the cost of loyalty. But life has a way of rolling back the curtain, and karma don't wear no watch. She just shows up when the timing's perfect. So when I opened my front door that afternoon, and she stood there with those shiny nails and fake humility, I already knew the storm she was hiding behind her smile. Word around town was her new business partner took off with her money, the same money she bragged about on Facebook, sitting in a white Tesla like she invented success. Now she was circling back to me, to the same house she once called a shack. "Can we talk?" she asked softly now, tone shifting like the weather before rain. I led her into the living room, same floral couch, same photo of Clarence in his army blues over the mantel. She looked around like she was touring the past, and for a moment she almost looked small again, the kind of small that comes when pride's too heavy to carry. "I've been, struggling," she started, twisting her purse strap. "I heard," I said. "I don't need your judgment, Helen, just your advice." Advice. The word tasted bitter in my mouth, like the years she ignored mine. "You know," I said, sitting down slow, "you used to call this place a trap. Now you came here looking for a map." Her lip trembled. I didn't enjoy it. Not exactly, but I won't lie. There's a peace that comes when justice wears no courtroom robe. The house was quiet, except for the rain starting to patter against the window. She looked out and whispered, "I just can't believe it all fell apart so fast. One minute we were living in a dream. Next minute, he's gone, the bills piling up, the car gone." I poured her some coffee. Because Southern women don't let guests cry without caffeine. She took it, hands trembling, fake nails clicking the cup. "I remember," I said gently, When you used to laugh at me for couponing, said I was too old-fashioned." "I know," she sighed. "I was stupid back then." "Back then?" I raised an eyebrow. "Baby, then just caught up to now." She looked down. "Do you hate me?" "Hate?" I chuckled softly. "Hate's too expensive. I live in peace now, paid in full." You could see her walls start to crumble. Every time she blinked, a memory leaked out. Marcus packing boxes after their last fight, her voice screaming about alimony she never earned, her friends disappearing when the gossip flipped. That's the thing about pride. It feeds you until it's time to pay the bill, and when it does, it takes everything, even the people who cheered you on. She took another sip and whispered, "I didn't realize how good I had it. This house, this peace. I used to think you were trapped here. And now? Now I'd give anything for a place that felt like home." That's when the thunder rolled outside, and I swear even the heavens agreed with me, because I didn't have to say a word. The truth had already said enough. I stood up, looked around that old house. The walls held 40 years of laughter, arguments, and Sunday dinners. The air smelled like lemon cleaner and forgiveness, and for the first time in years I felt Clarence's spirit close by, proud, patient, and poetic as always. "You know what this old house is worth now?" I asked quietly, turning back to her. She shrugged. "I don't know, maybe $500,000? I smiled. "Try 3. 3 of your new ones combined. Market went up, baby. Same as karma." Her eyes widened. 3? But it's not for sale, because peace ain't on the market." She swallowed hard, and I saw it. That moment when envy turns into regret. It's like watching glass melt. Slow, painful, irreversible. We sat there, 2 women who'd once shared the same man's last name, now sharing the same silence. The same roof that once sheltered her ambition, now sheltered her humility. Funny how life brings you back to where you started, just so you can see how far you've fallen. After a long pause, she said softly, "I should go?" I nodded. "That'd be best." She stood, straightened her jacket, and took one last look around. "It's a nice place," she whispered. "It always was," I said. "You just couldn't see it from the top of your pedestal." She flinched, but before walking out, she turned back, eyes glassy. "You think Marcus will ever forgive me?" I looked at her the way only an elder can, steady, unblinking. "Forgiveness ain't mine to give, baby, but peace? That's something you can build, just not on someone else's land." The door closed. The rain eased, and I exhaled the years I'd been holding. Outside, her car, that same shiny white Tesla, sputtered as thunder cracked again. Guess even her miracles were leased. I sat back on my couch, folded my hands, and whispered, "Lord, thank you for timing. You don't come early, but you never come late." The camera of life pulled back, slow, cinematic, through the rain-blurred window. And there she was, driving away from the house she once mocked. My house, the same house her laughter used to echo through, now standing stronger than her pride. The porch light flickered like a heartbeat, steady, unbothered. Clarence's picture caught the reflection of lightning, just a flash, but enough to make it look like he was smiling. And I whispered to the empty room, "She said I still live in this old house. But baby, this house still lives in me." That night, I sat in my rocking chair, the same one Clarence built me when Marcus was born, and listened to the rain rinse the world clean. It had that old rhythm, the kind that hums peace into your bones. Somewhere in the dark, a dog barked once, twice, then gave up. Peace was holding court, and even the night respected it. I looked at the cup she left behind, her lipstick printed on the rim like a confession. Every mark told a story, pride, regret, and something else she'd never say out loud. Need. But I wasn't cruel. I just learned how to love myself without being someone's fool. So I rinsed that cup, put it on the drying rack, and said out loud, Lord, that girl ain't evil, just blind. Because truth is, most betrayals don't come from monsters. They come from people who never learned what enough feels like. Next morning, I went about my usual routine, fed the stray cat that had been hanging round my porch since spring, turned on the old radio, gospel hour, and the first voice I heard said, "Don't curse the storm, baby. It's the only thing washing your roots." I smiled, because I knew he was talking to me. Later that week, Marcus stopped by. He looked like Clarence in the eyes now, that quiet fire kind of man, the kind who don't say much but always notice everything. "Ma," he said, sitting at the kitchen table, "I saw her car here the other day." "Mm-hmm." I didn't look up from slicing tomatoes. What did she want? Closure? Or maybe comfort? Hard to tell these days. He sighed. "I don't hate her, you know," he said softly. "I just can't go back." I looked up. "Good. Don't ever mistake history for destiny." He smiled. "You always got a sermon ready. And you always got ears, don't you?" He laughed, and just like that, the heaviness of years lifted a little. We ate breakfast slow, like old friends instead of just mother and son. I could see him healing in real time, piece by piece, like glass finding its shape again. After he left, I went outside to water my roses. They were Clarence's pride, red, full, dramatic things that refused to die even when the soil cracked. I bent down, touched one bloom, and thought about all the seasons this house had survived. The tornado in '93, the foreclosure scare in '08, the loneliness after Marcus moved out, the silence after Clarence passed, and now another kind of storm, pride returning home to ask for shelter. I didn't know if she'd ever really learn, but that wasn't my responsibility anymore. Sometimes the lesson ain't yours to teach. It's theirs to live through. A week passed before I saw her again. Same car, but this time parked crooked, like even the tires were tired. I opened the door before she could knock. Her face looked different. No makeup, no shield, just raw truth. "Miss Helen," she started, voice low, "I know you don't owe me nothing, but I wanted to thank you." "For what, baby?" "For not throwing my mistakes in my face." I smiled, leaning on the doorframe. "Didn't have to. You've been carrying him yourself." She laughed once, that kind of laugh that comes out as a sigh. Then she reached into her purse, pulled out a folded envelope, and handed it to me. "What's this?" "Paperwork," she said. "You'll see." I opened it right there. Deed transfer forms. The woman had signed over her share of the small rental property Marcus had co-signed years ago. The one she fought tooth and nail for in the divorce. "I don't want it anymore," she said quietly. "It don't feel right keeping something built from bad intentions." For a second, I didn't know what to say. That kind of repentance, real, humble, unpaid, don't show up often. I just nodded slow. "You finally learned, huh?" She looked down. "Payne's the best tutor I ever had." We sat on the porch, and for the first time, it wasn't tension. It was stillness. She told me about the empty condo, the friends who ghosted, the job that dried up, how she'd wake up at night missing noise, even the sound of Marcus walking heavy through the house. "Funny," she said, half smiling. "Back then, I used to dream about escaping this place. Now, I dream about coming back." "Life got a sense of humor like that," I said. The wind blew through the pecan tree, scattering dry leaves across the steps. One landed in her lap, crisp, brown, and perfect. She turned it over like it was a message. Maybe it was. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail from the city. Property valuation update. I laughed out loud when I opened it. My old house had just jumped in price again. 3 of hers now, I whispered. Maybe 4 soon. I poured myself a glass of sweet tea and raised it to the air. "To all the women who ever got mocked for staying grounded," I said softly, "turns out roots grow interest." One evening, the pastor called me, said he was putting together a church program on resilience in hard times, asked if I'd be willing to speak. I laughed. "You sure you want me preachin', Pastor? You know my tongue got edges." He chuckled. "That's exactly why we need you, Sister Helen." So I said yes. And that Sunday, the church was packed. Folding chairs down the aisle, fans waving like butterfly wings, choir humming behind me. When I walked up to the pulpit, I didn't bring notes. Didn't need 'em, I just brought truth. "I was mocked once," I started, my voice steady, "for living in what someone called an old house. But baby, let me tell you, what's old to one fool is holy to another." Laughter rippled through the crowd. I smiled, then continued. "See, this house raised generations, fed strangers, held prayers. It was built on sweat, love, and sacrifice. Ain't no insult in that. That's legacy." I looked out at the crowd. Some noddin', some cryin'. People chase new so hard they forget what's true. But time has a funny way of revealin' value. Gold don't need to explain itself. It just shines when the light finally hits. The church erupted. Hand claps, amens. "Preach, Miss Helen." And I felt Clarence smiling somewhere above, probably whispering, "That's my girl." After service, Marcus found me in the parking lot. He hugged me tight and said, "She came." "Who?" "You know who." I turned and saw her, standing near the back, hands clasped, eyes wet. She mouthed, "Thank you." I nodded. No need for words. Sometimes closure don't sound like a conversation. It feels like peace. That night, I sat on my porch swing again. The air was soft, fireflies dancing like tiny memories. I thought about everything I'd survived. Heartbreak, betrayal, loneliness, and the world's arrogance. And how none of it broke me. It just sculpted me. I whispered into the quiet, "They said I lived in an old house, but they never saw the crown it built on my soul." And then, just like clockwork, the wind carried the smell of rain again, same as the night she'd first come back. Maybe that was God's way of saying, "You did good, baby. You did real good." Before going in, I looked out one last time. Across the street, the neighbors' kids were playing with sparklers, laughter echoing under the night sky. Life moves on, but stories like mine, they echo. Because every woman's got an old house, something she's been mocked for keeping, a dream, a boundary, a standard. And when you stand firm long enough, the world comes back around just to ask how you did it. I smiled, closed the door behind me, and whispered, "I didn't move, baby. I grew." The next morning, sunlight cut through my kitchen window like grace itself. Dust danced in the beams, and for a second, it felt like time had stopped just to say, "You did right." I sat with my coffee, soft jazz playing low, thinking about how peace got a flavor when you've earned it. Something like caramel and quiet. That old house smell, wood polish, gospel radio, and a whisper of rain was still there. But it didn't smell like age anymore. It smelled like survival. Then the phone rang. "Miss Helen," it was Deacon Thomas from church. "Morning, Deacon." He cleared his throat. "You might want to sit down for this." Lord, I hate when people start sentences that way. "What is it?" I asked, steady but curious. "It's about her, the girl, Marcus's ex." I paused mid-sip. "What about her?" "She had a car accident last night. Nothing fatal, thank the Lord. But she's in the hospital, broke her arm. No insurance." I leaned back in my chair. Silence filled the room like fog. He added, "She gave them your number, said you were the only one she trusted to call?" That hit me deep, because for years she'd rather swallow glass than say she needed me. Now her pride was in a cast too. I drove to the hospital. The halls smelled like disinfectant and prayers half finished. When I walked into her room, she looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, like life had shrunk her down to fit the truth. Her arm was in a sling, her eyes red. "Hey," she whispered. "Hey, baby," I said softly. "You okay?" She smiled weakly. "Car hydroplaned. I should have slowed down." "Story of your life? Huh?" I said gently. "Always moving too fast." She laughed, then winced from the pain. "Still got that tongue, I see." "Still got that heart, too," I said, sitting by her bed. For the next few hours, I stayed with her, helped her talk to the nurse, made sure her paperwork was right. And when the nurse asked for an emergency contact, I didn't hesitate to say, "Put my name down." That's the thing about forgiveness. It don't always come with balloons and apologies. Sometimes it just walks in with steady hands and says, "I got you." Before I left, she reached for my hand. "Miss Helen," she whispered, "I don't deserve this kindness." "No one does," I said. "That's what makes it holy." A few weeks passed. She recovered slow, stayed quiet, didn't post a thing online, and for once she wasn't chasing applause. She was chasing peace. Marcus knew about the accident but didn't say much. He just nodded when I told him I visited her. "I'm proud of you, Ma," he said. "Proud of me?" I raised a brow. "Yeah, for being better than most folks could." I smiled. "I ain't better, just done." He chuckled. "That's wisdom talk." "That's survival talk," I said. One evening, she showed up again, arm still bandaged, hair tied back, humility glowing where vanity used to live. "I brought something," she said. She handed me a box, old wooden, heavy with time. Inside were photos. Marcus, her, me, even Clarence at the old picnic table years ago. She'd saved them all. "I couldn't throw these away," she said quietly. "Didn't feel right erasing the good just because of the bad." I looked at her. Not the girl who mocked my house, but the woman rebuilding herself one truth at a time. And I thought, maybe God was using me as sandpaper, not to hurt her, but to smooth her rough edges. That night, after she left, I went through the photos alone. There was one of me, Clarence, and Marcus in front of the house, paint peeling, laughter bright. Another of her holding a pie I baked for her first Thanksgiving as a married woman. I'd written, "Welcome home" on the crust. I held that photo and smiled. Maybe home ain't where you start. Maybe it's where you return when pride stops driving. Spring came fast that year. The azaleas bloomed like confessions. Pink, full, unapologetic. One afternoon she came by again, this time with gardening gloves. "Thought I'd help," she said shyly. I nodded. "Grab that trowel, baby. Dirt don't bite." We worked side by side, silent but comfortable. Sun on our backs, soil in our nails, forgiveness between our breaths. She looked up once and said, "This feels peaceful." "It's supposed to," I said. "That's what honest work feels like." A few weeks later, the "for sale" sign went up in front of her condo. She told me she was moving out, downsizing as she called it, but I knew better. She wasn't downsizing. She was right-sizing her soul. I helped her box things up. Every time she packed away another pair of high heels, I saw her spirit getting lighter. "You sure you don't want to keep some of these?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, I'm done trying to look tall in rooms built on lies." That line stuck with me, the kind of sentence life chisels into you. She moved into a small apartment across town, quiet, safe, sunlight on every wall. She sent me pictures. No fancy furniture, no designer labels, just peace. And for the first time, I believed she'd finally found something real. Every now and then, we'd meet at the farmer's market or church. Folks would whisper, surprised to see us side by side. Let 'em talk. Forgiveness ain't for show. It's for sleep. And baby, I was sleeping good. One Sunday after service, the pastor pulled me aside. "Sister Helen," he said, "you got a testimony that could save folks. Ever think about writing it down?" I laughed. "Write it down? Honey, I've been living it." He grinned. "Then maybe it's time to share it." That idea sat in me like a seed. So I started writing, a few pages a day, not for fame, not for pity, just to remember, to leave something behind besides furniture and regrets. The first line I wrote was, "She mocked my house once. Now she's rebuilding her own with humility for bricks." A year later, my story was published in a small local magazine called Southern Voices. It wasn't fancy, but it spread like wildfire through the community. Women stopped me in grocery aisles just to say, "Miss Helen, I read your story. You gave me courage to forgive my sister." "Miss Helen, I called my mama back after 5 years." That's when I realized revenge ain't always what burns your enemies. Sometimes it's what lights up the whole neighborhood. By the time autumn rolled around, the old house was more alive than ever. Marcus had started bringing his kids every weekend. They'd run through the yard laughing, kicking up leaves like time didn't matter, and I'd watch from the porch, the same porch she once called too small, smiling at how full it looked now. One evening, as the sun went down, she stopped by again, this time not as a guest, as family. She handed me a small, wrapped box. Inside was a framed photo. The house in golden light, flowers blooming all around. At the bottom, she'd written, "You still live in that old house?" She mocked. "Now it's worth 3 of mine, and 10 times my piece." I looked up at her, eyes wet. "Thank you, baby." She smiled. "No, thank you. For never boarding up your heart." As night settled, I stood on the porch one last time before bed. The stars looked close enough to touch, the air thick with the smell of jasmine and memory, and I whispered to myself, "This old house? It never got old. It just got sacred. Because some things don't lose value, they just wait for the world to wake up and see it. You ever wake up one morning and realize, peace done turned into power? That's what happened that fall. It wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It was quiet, like the kind of confidence that don't need applause. Because baby, when you've been through the fire and come out glowing, even silence sounds like a victory song. One Thursday, I got a letter from the city. At first, I thought it was another tax notice. You know how government loves its envelopes, but this one had gold embossing on the corner, Historical Registry nomination. I squinted, opened it slow. Turns out some local preservation group had nominated my house, that old house she once mocked, to be listed as a historic landmark. I laughed so hard I almost dropped my sweet tea. They called it an emblem of Southern perseverance and Black family legacy. That house had survived floods, storms, and fools, and now it was officially recognized for it. I framed the letter and hung it right above the mantel, next to Clarence's photo. He always said this house had soul. Now it had paperwork to prove it. That weekend, Marcus brought the grandkids over. He looked around and whistled. "Ma, you made the paper again." I shrugged. "Guess the world's finally catching up." The twins ran through the hallways laughing, touching the old wallpaper, asking, "Grandma, did you really live here when you were our age?" I grinned. "Baby, I still do." Then the little one said, "It smells like cookies and hugs." And that's when I realized, this is it. This is the dream Clarence worked for. Not money, not mansions. Legacy that smells like cookies and hugs. That night, I got a call from her again, the girl who once mocked this house. Except she wasn't that girl anymore. "Miss Helen," she said. "Hey, baby, what's wrong?" "Nothing wrong," she said softly. "I just wanted to say thank you again for not giving up on me." I leaned back in my chair, the creak echoing like a memory. "You finally giving yourself that same grace?" She paused. "Trying to. Some days I forgive myself. Some days I just remember I'm trying. Trying counts, baby. Trying's the bridge between pain and peace." She laughed through a sniffle. "You always got a quote ready." "Nah," I smiled. "Life just gave me too many lessons to stay quiet." A few weeks later, she came to church, not hiding in the back this time. She walked straight down the aisle and sat beside me. Heads turned, whispers buzzed like bees, but we didn't care, because forgiveness, when real, got its own kind of armor. When the choir sang, "I Won't Complain," I saw her crying, not from sadness, from release, and I held her hand, didn't say a word. Sometimes, healing don't need words. It just needs witnesses. After service, she hugged me long. That kind of hug that says, I see you without sound. And for the first time, it didn't feel like enemies reconciling. It felt like family remembering itself. Later that month, a TV producer from a local station called. They wanted to feature the story of the old house and the woman who turned mockery into a monument. I said, baby, I ain't no celebrity. He said, you're more than that. You're a mirror. People see themselves in you. So I agreed. When they came to film, the crew kept saying things like, the lighting in here is amazing. It feels alive. I smiled. That's 'cause it is. They asked me to stand on the porch and tell the story from the beginning. So I did. I told them about the day she mocked the house, how the air was thick with perfume and pride, how I stood in silence because my peace was louder than her words, how years later life brought her right back, humbled, hurting, and healing. And when I finished, the cameraman wiped his eyes and said, Ma'am, I think I just filmed a sermon. I laughed. You did, baby. You just didn't know the pulpit had flower pots. The episode aired on a Sunday evening. By Monday morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Neighbors, strangers, old classmates, even Marcus's co-workers. Miss Helen, your story gave me chills. You reminded me not to give up on what's mine. Ma'am, I called my mama 'cause of you. I sat on my porch reading those messages, tears falling steady. That's when I realized the revenge I'd been given wasn't mine alone. It was everybody's who'd ever been laughed at for being still standing. A month later, she came by again holding a small folder. I brought you something, she said shyly. Inside was a copy of her application for nursing school. I got in, she whispered. Started classes next month. I felt my throat tighten. Look at you, I said, trading fake bags for real purpose. She laughed. I guess I finally learned what worth really means. I reached over, cupped her hand, and said, You didn't lose your life, baby. You just changed the price tag. That spring, she helped me repaint the house. Soft buttercream walls, white trim, deep navy shutters. When we finished, she stood back, hands on her hips, grinning. Looks brand new, she said. I chuckled. Just like you. The wind picked up, blowing through the yard, carrying the smell of paint and magnolia. And I swear I could almost hear Clarence's voice in the breeze. You see, baby, you didn't just build a house. You built history. We had a cookout that weekend. Neighbors came, church folks came. Even the mayor stopped by to congratulate me. There was laughter, kids running through sprinklers, ribs on the grill, the kind of scene that could heal a decade. At one point, she stood up to make a toast. She looked around and said, I used to think this house was small, but I was wrong. It's the biggest thing I've ever stood inside, because it holds love big enough to forgive me. The crowd went silent, then broke into applause. I looked at her and nodded. That was her graduation before nursing school ever started. After the guests left, we sat on the porch again. Fireflies floated around like gentle ghosts. She said, You ever think Clarence would be proud? I smiled. He always is. He just sends signs instead of words. A shooting star cut across the sky right then. She gasped. You see that? I nodded. Told you. We laughed until our sides hurt. And for the first time, I realized revenge ain't always about proving people wrong. Sometimes it's about proving love right. Weeks turned into months. She thrived in school. Marcus remarried, a kind, steady woman who fit peace like a glove. And me? I just kept tending my roses, cooking my greens, and letting the world spin without me needing to chase it. Every once in a while, a stranger still drives by, slow, rolls down their window, and says, You still live in that old house? And I smile. Still, baby, I reined in it. Because that's the thing about staying put. When storms pass, you're the only one still holding the crown. I went back inside, lit a single candle on the table, and whispered, For every woman who was ever underestimated, may your roots outgrow their judgment. The flame flickered like it understood, and maybe it did, because this was more than a story. It was proof that grace ages better than revenge ever could. You know what nobody tells you about peace? It's not quiet. It hums. It hums like gospel through the floorboards, like wind in the pecan trees, like the sound of your own breath when you finally stop explaining yourself. That's what my house sounded like that summer. A hum. Not from the refrigerator or the old ceiling fan, but from the life it held. People pass through now like pilgrims, church folk, journalists, students writing papers on Black women resilience in Southern architecture. Even one young YouTuber came, camera in hand, saying, "Miss Helen, I want to show the internet what healing looks like." I laughed. "Baby, healing don't need filters. Just tell the truth slow enough for folks to feel it." The girl, my former daughter-in-law, graduated nursing school that August. She sent me a picture. White uniform, soft smile, stethoscope like a redemption necklace. At the bottom, she'd written, "Thank you for teaching me how to save people without losing myself." That line hit me like sunrise, because she wasn't just talking about medicine, she was talking about life. And maybe so was I. A few months later, I got invited to speak at a women's conference in Atlanta. The flyer said, "Aunt Helen, lessons from a Southern matriarch, turning pain into power." I laughed when I saw that aunt. "Lord," I said out loud, "they done turned me into a brand." But I went anyway. When I walked into that ballroom, it was full of women, all ages, all stories. Some holding notebooks, some holding pain. When I stepped up to the microphone, I didn't give them a sermon. I gave them a mirror. "I once got mocked," I said, "for living in an old house. They called it outdated, said it smelled like yesterday. But baby, yesterday built tomorrow." Murmurs filled the room. I could see heads nodding, eyes watering. That house wasn't just walls. It was proof. Proof that roots outlive rumors. Proof that slow don't mean stuck. Proof that quiet women can build earthquakes. Someone shouted, "Amen!" I smiled. "And let me tell you," I continued, "ain't no revenge sweeter than being unbothered. 'Cause peace, real peace, don't clap back. It just keeps growing until the noise runs out of air." The room stood up. Applause rolled like thunder. And for a moment, I swear I felt Clarence's hand on my shoulder, whispering, "You didn't just survive, baby. You testified." After the conference, a reporter asked me, "Miss Helen, if you could tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?" I thought for a moment and said, I'd tell her, "Don't rush to prove your worth. Just live it long enough for the world to notice." He smiled. "That's powerful." I nodded. "No, baby, that's peaceful." When I got back home, the porch light had burned out. I replaced the bulb and noticed something new, a faint carving in the porch rail. I bent closer and saw it. C+, ch, forever. Clarence had carved that the week we moved in. 40 years later, the wood still held it. Not even weather could erase us. I ran my fingers over it and whispered, "You were right, baby. Forever didn't end. It just grew roots." Weeks turned to months again. The girl, now Nurse Davis, came by on weekends, bringing groceries, helping with the garden. We'd talk about patience, purpose, and prayer. She wasn't the same woman who once strutted in judgment. She was softer now, sharper, too. One afternoon she said, "You ever think Marcus will come around to forgive me?" I looked up from my rose bush and said, "He already has. He just don't talk forgiveness. He lives it." "How can you tell?" she asked. "Because he don't say your name bitter anymore." She smiled, tears slipping quiet. Sometimes the proof of forgiveness ain't in words. It's in the way your name stops tasting like pain in somebody else's mouth. That winter, Marcus brought his new wife and kids for Christmas. I set the table like a queen preparing her kingdom. Cornbread, collard greens, sweet potato pie, fried catfish. The smell filled the house like memory itself. When everyone sat down, I noticed Nurse Davis in the doorway, holding a covered dish. She looked nervous. Marcus saw her, froze for a second, then nodded for her to come in. She walked in slow, eyes wet but steady. "Merry Christmas," she said softly. "Merry Christmas," he answered, voice calm, not cold. She uncovered the dish, macaroni and cheese, baked golden, edges crisp. "My peace offering," she said with a small smile. Marcus chuckled. "You remembered my favorite." "Didn't forget," she said. "Just needed time to remember who I was when I made it." I felt the room exhale. That was the sound of generational healing. Dinner went smoother than I could have dreamed. Laughter returned to that table like it had just been waiting for an invitation. When we bowed heads for prayer, Marcus said, "Lord, thank you for second chances, in homes, in hearts, and in history." Amen never felt so true. After dessert, while the kids played under the tree, I stepped outside. The night was cold but kind. Stars blinked like applause. I looked through the window at my son, his wife, his ex-wife, and his children, all under one roof, all eating in peace. And I whispered, "You see that, Clarence? We made it. Our house didn't just stand, it healed." The story didn't end that night, because stories like mine don't end. They echo. The local news ran a follow-up on the old house that became a legacy, and someone wrote in the comments, "You still live in that old house?" She mocked. "Now it's worth 3 of hers, and 10 of our lessons." That line went viral again, but this time not as gossip, as gospel. Because people finally understood what I'd been saying all along. Value ain't about square footage, it's about square faith. So now, when folks drive by and slow down, I smile from the porch. Some wave, some shout, "We love you, Aunt Helen." And I wave back, rocking slow in my chair, gospel radio humming low, peace humming lower. If they only knew, the real victory wasn't that my house tripled in value, it's that my spirit did. Before bed, I light one candle and whisper the same prayer every night. "Thank you, Lord, for the things you let fall apart, 'cause I wouldn't have known peace if you hadn't broken my pride first." And when the flame flickers, I swear I hear Clarence again, low and laughing from somewhere beyond the walls. "Told you, baby. Storms don't ruin what's built on love." Then I smile, turn out the light, and let the hum of peace fill the night again. Because after everything, every mock, every scar, every comeback, I finally understood the truth. Some houses aren't just homes. They're proof God can turn shame into sanctuary. Winter passed like a gentle old song, slow, steady, and full of truth I didn't have to chase anymore. I'd wake up to the sound of wind pressing against the windows, like it was checking to see if I was still here. I'd smile, sip my coffee, and say, "Still here, Lord, still learning." Some mornings, I swear, I could hear Clarence's voice in the radiator pipes, grumbling soft like he used to. "Don't forget to wrap the faucets, baby. Cold don't warn you twice." And I'd laugh and say, "I know, old man, I know." Because that's what love does when it outlives the body. It echoes through pipes and timber until it sounds like the house itself is talking back. One Sunday in January, Marcus brought his kids over again. Snow was falling in lazy flakes, covering the yard like powdered sugar. The girls ran out to make snow angels while I baked biscuits. "You ever think about selling this place?" Marcus asked. I looked at him like he'd lost his ever-loving mind. "Sell peace? You can't put that on no listing." He laughed. "I knew you'd say that, just checking." "Boy," I smiled, "you don't check a heartbeat if it's still singing." That afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was her again, now Nurse Davis, wearing a navy coat and that same humble smile she'd learned the hard way. "I brought you something," she said. She handed me a little white envelope. Inside was a photograph. Me and her, arm in arm, standing in front of the house after the painting was done, and taped to the corner was a check. "What's this for?" I asked. She said, "It's a donation to the church scholarship fund, under Clarence's name, for kids who can't afford nursing school." I just stared at her. Words don't work right when Grace walks in with its head bowed. I hugged her, tight. "That's how you keep his light on, baby," I whispered. Months rolled by. The story of the old house kept growing like a vine. Radio interviews, church newsletters, school projects. One day, a college professor called to ask if they could bring students for a field trip. "Field trip?" I laughed. "You mean to my living room?" "Yes, ma'am," he said, "to learn about resilience." So they came. 22 young women, bright-eyed and hungry for hope. I showed them the garden, the porch, the photographs on the mantel, and I told them, "This house ain't magic. It's memory that refused to die. Whatever you build, make sure it's strong enough to hold your truth when the world forgets it." They cried, took notes. One girl hugged me and said, "My mama needed to hear this." I said, "Then go be her echo." That night, as I sat in my rocking chair, the phone rang again. It was Marcus. "Ma, you won't believe this. The city wants to turn your story into a documentary." I laughed. "They gonna have to bring a wide lens to catch all these lessons." He said, "They calling it the old house that refused to die." I paused. "That's cute, but they better add, and the woman who refused to quit." When the crew came back to film, I didn't wear makeup. Didn't need it. Wisdom already highlights you better than any powder can. They asked me, "What's your secret, Miss Helen?" I said, "Secret? Ain't no secret, just 3 rules. Keep your word, keep your peace, keep your receipts, emotional and financial." The director laughed so hard he had to cut the camera. After they left, I walked the yard one last time before sunset. The grass was thick under my bare feet, cool and clean. Birds chattered like gossip in the trees. And for the first time in decades, I realized I had nothing left to prove, because the mockery that once echoed through these walls had turned into music. Every scar was a note, every lesson a lyric, and when the wind blew just right, the whole house hummed along. That night I dreamed of Clarence. He was standing on the porch, smiling that slow smile of his. "Looks good, baby," he said. I looked around and said, "It's ours forever now." He nodded. "Been ours since the first nail. You just had to see it." I woke up with tears on my face, but they weren't sad. They were thankful. 'Cause I finally understood, God don't just restore what you lose. He upgrades it until you recognize yourself again. That spring, they unveiled the plaque on my porch. Bronze, heavy, beautiful. It read, "Helen Davis Home Place, built in 1974 by love rebuilt by grace, a landmark of faith and forgiveness." The crowd cheered. Camera flashes sparked like fireflies. Nurse Davis stood beside me in tears. Marcus took my hand, and for a moment the whole city felt like family. When the ceremony was over, I looked straight into the news camera and said, "Somebody once asked me, 'You still live in that old house?' I sure do, but now it ain't old, it's eternal." The crowd roared, because every soul in that yard knew what I meant. We all got something we've been mocked for holding on to, and if we just stand long enough, time turns mockery into museum glass. That night, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and let the street go quiet. I looked at the plaque, at the roses, at the light in the windows, and I said to no one in particular, "Clarence, they called it an old house. But you and me? We knew better. It was a promise with a roof on it." The wind answered by swaying the chimes, and I rocked slow, humming the same song the house was humming back. The summer I turned 71, the house started talking louder, not in ghosts, in memories. Every creak meant something. The hallway still groaned like Marcus's teenage sighs. The kitchen faucet still dripped on the beat of Clarence's favorite hymn. And the front door? It breathed like an old friend who'd been waiting on me to listen. I used to be afraid of getting old. Now I see it's just God giving you a longer echo. One morning I was out pruning the roses when a young woman stopped her car at the curb. She was maybe 30. Sharp suit, Bluetooth in her ear, the look of somebody chasing life like it owed her. "Excuse me," she called. "Is this the famous house?" I smiled. "Famous is a stretch, baby. It's just faithful." She laughed. "I read about you in that magazine. My mama sent me the article, said I needed to learn patience." "Well," I said, "you came to the right porch. Patience is the rent I pay for peace." She turned off her car and sat beside me on the steps, shoes too pretty for dirt. We talked for an hour about ambition, heartbreak, and the way the world don't clap for women until they bleed. When she left, she hugged me tight and said, "I needed this more than therapy." I whispered, "Therapy teaches you to breathe. Wisdom teaches you what to breathe for." After she drove away, I looked up and told Clarence, "Guess we landlords of lessons now." That night, I sat with my journal. I've been keeping one since the day Marcus was born. Every joy, every bruise, every recipe that healed somebody. I flipped through the pages. July 1982, Clarence built the porch rail. March 1993, hail broke the window. We fixed it with prayer and duct tape. November 2010, she mocked my house. I stayed silent. I added a new line. June 2025. The house became a school. Word spread fast again. Soon I was hosting porch circles every Sunday evening. Not church, just women, folding chairs, lemonade, and honesty. We called it the Porch Light Circle because that light had guided me through every dark season. Each woman shared her story. One had lost a job after 30 years. One was raising her sister's kids. One was fighting cancer and loneliness at the same time. They cried, they laughed, and they all left lighter. I told them, the porch don't judge. It just listens till you find your strength. By the fourth week, even men started standing on the sidewalk just to listen from the fence. The neighborhood had found its heartbeat again. One Sunday, Nurse Davis brought cupcakes with little candles on top. "What's this for?" I asked. "For you," she said, "for turning our pain into a porch." I chuckled. Lord, I never even owned a microphone. "You didn't need one," she said. "Your house amplified you." And just like that, we started recording those evenings. Audio only. We uploaded them as a podcast called Aunt Helen's Porch. Didn't think much of it. 2 weeks later, it had 500,000 plays. Women wrote from everywhere. "Your voice feels like my grandmother's lap." "I was going to leave my marriage till I heard you say, 'Some storms just need you to stay dry, not drown.'" I live in an old house too, Miss Helen. You made me proud again. I cried reading them. Not from pride, from awe. Because I realized the algorithm that mattered most wasn't on YouTube or Spotify. It was heaven's. And baby, its retention rate is eternal. A few months later, Marcus called. "Ma, you trending." I laughed. "Trending? I don't even know what button that is." He said, "People online calling you the godmother of grace. You got sponsors, speaking invites." I cut him off. "I didn't start this to sell mugs, boy." "I know," he said, chuckling. "That's why it works." Around that time, the city announced a plan to restore the block. New sidewalks, trees, murals. They asked if they could paint one side of my fence. I told them only if they painted truth. A week later, I walked outside and saw it. A mural of me, rocking on the porch, sun behind me with the words, "Kindness ain't weakness. It's just quiet until it strikes." The same quote I'd said years ago, now written 10 feet tall in gold paint. I stood there, hand over my chest, whispering, "Clarence, we on a wall now. Lord, look what grace can build." One evening after the dedication, I was rocking slow when a familiar car pulled up. Marcus stepped out, but this time with his oldest daughter, now 16, all legs and light. She said, "Grandma, my history teacher assigned us to write about a woman who changed her world." I grinned. "Who'd you pick?" She smiled. You? That laugh that left my mouth could have healed somebody miles away. Why me, baby? 'Cause you proved you can rebuild the same place people tried to bury you. I reached out, touched her cheek, and said, "Then promise me this. When life tells you you're too much or too late, remember, your foundation don't expire." She nodded, eyes shining. Weeks later, the first royalty check from the podcast arrived. I took that money and started the Clarence and Helen Scholarship Fund for single parents going back to school. At the first award ceremony, Nurse Davis spoke on stage. She didn't just keep a house standing, she kept a generation standing. I stood beside her, tears wet and proud. The crowd rose to its feet, clapping like thunder rolling through grace. That night I sat outside again, porch light glowing, air sweet with honeysuckle. And I thought about everything that word old used to mean. Outdated, forgotten, faded. But now I knew better. Old just means tested, proven, sacred. The house creaked softly like an amen, and I whispered back, "We still standing, baby. We still teaching." In the distance, church bells rang. The moon laid silver across the roof, and I felt it again. That same hum that never stopped since the day she mocked me. Except now it wasn't the sound of hurt. It was harmony. Because when life finally sings your story back to you in the right key, you don't need revenge anymore. You just need rest. I closed my eyes, rocking slow, and said to the night, "They asked if I still live in this old house. I do, but truth is, this old house lives in everybody now." Wind rustled through the pecan tree like applause. The autumn air that year smelled like endings and beginnings all at once. Leaves whispered their goodbyes, and every sunrise felt like a slow hallelujah. I'd survived storms, seen pride turn into peace, watched my house outlive every rumor ever spoken over it. And now it was time to rest in the proof. I didn't rush the days anymore. I let them unfold like hymns, each hour a verse, each dusk an amen. One morning, I woke to find the porch covered in letters. Actual letters. Envelopes stacked, rubber banded, some tied with ribbons. The mailman said, "They just keep comin', Miss Helen. Folks from everywhere." I sat on the steps and opened the first one. "Dear Aunt Helen, I listened to your story on the bus every day while leaving a man who broke me. Your voice made me brave enough to keep walking. Thank you." Another read. "Miss Helen, my mama said she was too old to dream again. I played her your podcast. Now she's starting a bakery out our kitchen. We call it Old House Pies." I laughed till tears blurred the ink. The porch that once held shame now held miracles, mailed in paper, and gratitude. That night, Marcus stopped by with takeout catfish. He sat across from me, same smile as his daddy's, same quiet pride. "Ma," he said, "you realize what you did?" "What's that?" "You turned a mock into a movement." I chuckled. I just told the truth loud enough for Grace to hear it. He shook his head. "You always been something else. And don't you forget it." We ate, laughed, and listened to the crickets preach in the dark. Before leaving, he kissed my forehead and whispered, "I love you, old house lady." I whispered back, "And don't you ever sell my legacy, boy." Weeks later, the city invited me to light the winter festival tree. Hundreds showed up, neighbors, pastors, students, even the mayor. Snowflakes swirled like confetti as they handed me the switch. Before flipping it, I said into the mic, "Years ago, somebody asked me why I still live in my old house. Well, baby, this house taught me something. If you stay rooted long enough, even your scars grow flowers." Then I flipped the switch. The lights blazed gold. And for a heartbeat, the whole crowd stood still, bathed in glow, baptized in story. A child's voice shouted, "We love you, Aunt Helen!" And I swear I heard Clarence laugh through the wind, saying, "Told you, baby, you were the light all along." After the festival, I walked home alone. Snow crackled under my boots, air sharp as peppermint. When I turned the corner, I saw my porch glowing. Candles lined the rails, letters pinned to the posts. The community had left them there. Each candle was for someone they'd forgiven, someone they'd come home to. I sank into my rocker and just let it hit me. Every flicker out there was a heartbeat that refused to hate anymore. That's what legacy really is. Not who remembers your name, but who heals because you refuse to stay bitter. Later that night, Nurse Davis called. "Miss Helen," she said, voice trembling, "I passed my state exam. I'm officially RN Davis now." I grinned. "Well, look at God. Told you your comeback had credentials." She laughed through tears. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have. I just made sure you didn't forget you could." She went quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know, I visit my mama's grave now without anger." "That's healing talk," I said. "Keep speaking it." When we hung up, I felt the house exhale, like even the walls were proud. The next morning, the sun came through the curtains, soft as apology. I brewed coffee, wrote a note for Marcus on the fridge. "Don't worry if I sleep late. Peace is heavy, but it's good weight." I spent the day doing little things, polishing the mantel, feeding the stray cat, watering the indoor ferns. Every gesture felt like prayer, and sometime around dusk, I sat on the porch one more time, wrapped in my shawl, candle burning low. The sky turned that honey and violet color that only shows up when heaven wants your attention. I whispered, "Lord, if this is the last season you give me, thank you, 'cause you let me see what redemption looks like on earth." The wind answered with a soft hush through the trees. Days later, I woke to birds singing louder than usual. Sunlight poured across the kitchen like blessing water. I knew. When Marcus came by that afternoon, I was still in my rocker, peace written across my face like a full-stop sentence. The candle beside me had burned down to the wick. Next to it sat my final note, folded neat, written in the same journal I started decades ago. They asked me once if I still live in that old house. Baby, I did, till the day it learned to live without me. If you ever doubt your worth, look at these walls. They were mocked once, too. But look what God built out of patience. The house didn't cry. Houses like this don't mourn. They testify. When folks came to pay respects, the floorboards hummed under their feet like they remembered every sermon I never preached. And at the funeral, Marcus stood and said, "My mama didn't just own a house. She was the house. Every soul she sheltered became a room, every forgiveness a window." The church shouted, "Amen," till the roof shook. Outside, doves scattered across the sky like exclamation points. Months passed. Marcus kept the house, just like I knew he would. He and the kids started hosting Porchlight Circles again. The podcast kept running, my voice still telling stories every Sunday night. People said, "It feels like she never left." And maybe I didn't. Maybe I'm just part of the hum now. The same one that lives in the pipes, the walls, the rose bushes. The same hum that tells anyone who stands on that porch, stay, heal, build, repeat. And if you drive down Magnolia Lane today, you'll see the porch light still glowing. There's a new plaque beneath the old one added by Marcus, the Aunt Helen house, where forgiveness became furniture and peace paid the bills. The sign beneath reads, "You still live in that old house?" she mocked. "It's worth 3 of hers now, an eternity besides." The camera pulls back slow, rain kissing the roof, gospel humming from an unseen radio. Inside, laughter. On the wall, a photograph of a woman in a white shawl, eyes bright with knowing. And a voice, soft, steady, eternal, rises through the quiet. They wanted my silence, so I gave them a sermon. This was Aunt Helen, still standin', still lovin', still learnin'.